And protecting the communications network and millions of connected devices is now highly regarded as security concerns cut across dozens of technologies and verticals. So what's in store for 2017 as we rethink and develop new security measures in the network? On this edition of TI Now, we are joined with G. Rittenhouse. He's Senior Vice President of Engineering for Cisco's Security Business Group. And G, welcome to the program.
Thank you very much. Glad to be here.
Well, glad you're with us. I want to start off by something that I did notice on your company's website, on Cisco's website. There's a video description or illustration, rather, of a typical attack on an enterprise network, and it's titled The Anatomy of an Attack. And for our viewers, we'll be sure to add that link to the bottom of this on-demand video when we send it out. But the video describes, well, we can let our viewers watch the video, but can you describe the anatomy of an attack, possibly on a Tier 1 communications network?
Yeah, so we've actually taken a fair amount of care putting that video together. We found it's a great kind of educational tool on showing some of the elements of an attack. And some of the key elements that you'll find there are first of all, these attacks are very focused and very professional. It's not just some teenager exploring the network like they did in the old days with blue boxes and whatnot. It's a very large business and growing, both from an international espionage perspective as well as nation states and the usual kind of intelligence seeking, if you will.
Gee, I want to sort of maybe, again, illustrate for our viewers what we can expect in the security space in 2017. And I'll do a sort of a quick fire, I'll quick fire down this list, if I may, and start with your views on next generation firewall and what we can expect in 2017.
So in all of these categories, next gen firewall being the first, the one overarching movement in 2017 and beyond are that these, what were silos, security silos, are now becoming security solutions. Next-gen firewall is one of those, and of course the edge and the perimeter of the enterprise is critical. That establishes the boundary of essentially all of the compliance and rules and regulations. So the firewall is there, but the capability of a firewall continues to increase beyond just protocols, but into layers 4 through 7, into more of some of the networking capabilities around segmentation and micro-segmentation, and of course extending the firewall into public cloud workloads and extending the enterprise boundary into the public cloud.
Now, number 2 on this 5-point list is network security, what we can expect in the security space in the network in 2017.
On the network side, the network is being more and more seen from a security view as a sensor, as well as an enforcer. So we really do look at the network as from a sensor point of view. The network actually produces quite a bit of information from not only the traditional logs and net flow, but some more nuanced patterns and traffic patterns inside the network. And we use that to sense the threats. We don't want, let's say, a printer talking to a Tor network. And then as an enforcement capability, again, segmenting the network, putting users into different network categories from known threat to familiar user, and then applying the policies across that network.
Speaking of policies, if you could go a little more granular maybe on security policy.
Well, again, with regard to policy, we do see and take a more comprehensive approach, particularly in 2017 and beyond. It was sufficient at one time to just have network policies and security policies. Now, of course, those two are merged together and included into the cloud space. So we see not only defining coherent policies across cloud network and endpoints, but also including things like policy conflict resolution, deduping, having a coherent policy across all of those elements. And to simplify that, we see a lot of the policy description and enforcement elements moving into the cloud so that you have full capabilities from the cloud across the network, public cloud, on-prem cloud, and private devices.
And next is endpoint security.
Well, endpoint is still a key element across every enterprise, but obviously expanding beyond just antiviral capabilities, but including more defense responses, so that, of course, with malware, users are actually clicking on links, users are actually bringing in the email. So as a result, you can get by some of the firewalls, the antiviral firewalls, particularly if you're not keeping them up to date. So what really is the focus from the endpoint perspective is the time to detection and then the time to resolution. Because we know that as users click on things they shouldn't be clicking on, that things will get through those boundaries.
And G, you touched on this a little bit earlier, but a little bit more on cloud security.
Well, again, a lot of workloads are going into the cloud. Security is the number one concern from our customers as that transition happens, not just around making sure that the file is secure, but also from a data perspective, but also from operations perspective. Companies are putting their operations into the cloud, and so if those get attacked and infiltrated, then malicious behavior can actually affect the operations of the enterprise, not just the data of the enterprise. And so there's been a lot of effort, both in the CASB space, as well as the protecting the public cloud infrastructure. But we see this as a trend that just continues to grow as more and more operational workloads go into the cloud.
So of course, G, Cisco partners with many companies in the telematics and IoT sectors, and really by all accounts, these are the most prone to security breaches. What's your general sentiment about the connected vehicle sector and how industry is addressing the myriad of security concerns, maybe either on the network side or on the device side?
Well, we see IoT kind of in two ways. One is the IoT space is almost defined by a very close coupling between the device and the application. And that kind of vertical structure is very, very popular in the IoT space. However, those applications more and more reside in the cloud. So there is a link between the device and the application itself, even though those two have a high affinity towards one another. We focused on that link, making sure that the link is secure and inserting the service provider and their trusted network inside that link. So we just we made an acquisition earlier this year. The company is called Jasper. Others are going into this space as well, focusing on the link. On the other side, though, the devices, whether they sit in cars or in homes and enterprises, are also under attack. And we feel that the industry really has to focus and pay more attention on the devices. These devices are generally relatively inexpensive. And as a result, they have passwords that are burned into their boot processes. They're difficult to upgrade and patch. And so there's vulnerabilities there. And we've seen this in some of the most famous denial of service attacks recently with video cameras that have high bandwidth on the uplink. We should be able to narrow that bandwidth and segment that traffic away from particular websites and in the usual kind of DDoS type protection. And so IoT represents a great opportunity from a business perspective, but we do see a strong service provider as well as device manufacturing push, whether it sits in the car, which has obvious consequences, or in the home or enterprise.
Gee, it's good to talk to you about network security and really on a number of fronts. I go to conferences just like you do, and it's always that discussion is always integrated into the larger discussion. But unless you go, and this is my opinion, unless you go to a security-specific conference, you really can't get that granular on some of these thought leadership discussions. Are you finding that as well, or is that discussion growing and evolving as we go forward?
Well, the security industry is an extremely dynamic industry led by technology because the threat vectors and the participants are always changing. It's a highly dynamic marketplace, and you really have to continue the investment and continue to stay current on both the threats and the responses. One of the big trends that we've seen over the last year or two is, again, moving away from point solutions into comprehensive solutions so that a threat found anywhere in any customer is then the response can be pushed to all customers across all vectors of the enterprise, whether it's firewall, email, web, end device, cloud. And so we see that these elements, which kind of traditionally were considered isolated and standalone, are now becoming highly coupled together to kind of deal with this asymmetric threat of an attacker trying to probe an enterprise, trying to probe any sort of network, looking for that one weakness. And so no one device or approach can solve that, but a more comprehensive, uniform, systematic approach is where we see the industry heading. And so we do see the industry either taking a broad portfolio like Cisco and others, or you start to see a lot of broad partnerships occurring in the industry.
Well, G, thanks again for your time.
It's my pleasure. Have a great day.
You too, G. And to our viewers, thank you for watching this edition of TI Now. And for the on-demand version of this program, please go to tinow.org. So long.